What's up, rampaging tyrannosaurs of the internet? It's Peter here. I'm a speculative fiction writer, the publisher behind Brainjar Press. And right now we're going to do part 2 of a series of videos about how to nail the ending of your story. And this one is all about how you take this idea we talked about in video 1, the idea that a story or a film should end on a character, often the protagonist, making a moral choice, and how people can get it dramatically wrong. Now, there are 3 ways that this tends to go astray in the cinema world, and it often tends to correlate with the way people do it in prose as well. The first mistake people make is they put the moral choice too early into the climactic sequence of the story. So there's a really great example of this in the third Fast and the Furious film, Fast and the Furious Tokyo Drift, where this entire film revolves around this character making a decision about who he's going to be. Is he going to be a driver? Is he going to be this other kind of person? And he goes through this entire narrative experience. His mentor dies. He learns to control the car. And he eventually makes the decision that no, he is going to be, he's going to make his moral choice. And then there is a 20-minute chase sequence, much of it done in CGI in very low light, in which we get to see him demonstrate his skill in drift driving. And there is a certain portion of the audience, the people who are really there for the driving experiences and really want to see these kind of chase sequences, who are going to go with that. But for everyone else, for the people who are watching this film for the character and the heart of the character, that ending just completely falls flat, because once he's made the decision, there's no longer anywhere for his character to go. The chase sequence doesn't actually mean anything anymore. It's just, it's like if Luke decided to use the Force and blow up the Death Star, and then it took another 20 minutes for him to finally, put the photon torpedo into the exhaust port. There's just too long between the point where the character makes the decision and the payoff of it, where we get to see, yes, you have made this decision, and now you triumph. And it just kind of robs all the energy of the story, because that emotional choice, that moral choice, is what sort of creates the beating heart of the story. It's what we live for as readers, even if we don't really register it. So the second way you can get this slightly wrong is you can have a character make a moral choice at the end of the story, but either the same character or a different character makes a much bigger and more momentous moral choice that is also dramatically on theme for the story. So there is a great example of this in Hellboy 2: The Golden Army, right? So this entire film revolves around the choices between the choice Hellboy is making between whether he is going to ally himself with the human world and be a hero, or whether he's ultimately going to decide to become a monster and, ally himself with the supernatural. And the final choice he makes in this story is, he chooses to kill the bad guy. And does so knowing that it will cost his best friend the love of his life. And it feels like it should be a great choice. And it probably would be a great choice if certain other things didn't happen in the film. But there are 2 moments in that film where it feels like Hellboy makes something bigger. Like the loss of his friend's love is actually a very personal thing. It's a very defining thing for him. But about 5-10 minutes earlier in the film, there is an entire sequence where Hellboy's love interest, Liz, is asked to make the decision. Hellboy is dying. The Angel of Death appears and says, you can either save his life and doom humanity, or you can let him die and humanity will be saved. And that is a huge decision. That is a big, momentous decision that is entirely on theme for the story. And it's really hard to come back from that, because once a character has said, no, screw it, I'm going to doom humanity in the name of love, it's really hard to go back to, and now I will doom my best friend in the name of doing the right thing. And I think what they're aiming for is a sense of contrast there, but the scale is just wrong. One decision is so much bigger and so much more momentous and such a huge moral choice that the other just can't hold up to it. It doesn't have the same kind of meaning. And I think you probably could have pulled this off. Like, the midpoint of that film is this entire sequence where Hellboy kills a giant rampaging wood elemental. And I love this scene, and I love this film. I'm being picky about its ending, but I absolutely love this film. It's beautiful. And I love this scene where Hellboy finally makes the decision to kill this wood elemental, and does it knowing that it's going to take it's going to have an enormous cost on magic. And it's really going to change the nature of magic around the world. And it's a big decision. And again, it would have been a great decision to have at the end. It could have almost had the same kind of weight as Liz's decision to save Hellboy and doom humanity. But they choose not to do that. They put that in the middle. They put the doom humanity, and then we go to, and I'm just going to kill this bad guy knowing it'll kill his twin sister and doom my best friend to a life of heartache. And it just, it's just a misfire. There are 3 great decisions being made, but they could have gone in a completely different direction, and it would have been a more powerful ending to that film. So the third ending, and the third way these things go wrong, is characters make moral decisions, but the moral decision is either too easy or doesn't feel like it is a resolution to the kind of conflict that has been going on for the entire film. So there is a great example of this if you go and look at a B-grade film from the 80s called Robot Jox. It is not a great film. It is it is a giant robot fighting film from the era before CGI, so everything is done with practical effects. It is cheesy. It has terrible dialogue. It is kind of this glorious mess of a film. But I used to watch a lot of really bad movies. One of the things I've learned about bad movies is that it is often much more enjoyable to watch a really terrible movie that is hugely ambitious and failing than a movie that is making really safe choices and just hitting the mark. And Robot Jox is hugely ambitious and failing on so many levels. But this entire film revolves around war has been eliminated from Earth. Instead, nations fight wars using giant mechanized robots, and the pilots are the kind of sporting heroes of the era. And the protagonist of Robot Jox doesn't really face a series of character arcs. Like the major decision he makes at the end of the film is he's not going to kill the Russian pilot who has plagued him all through the story. And it doesn't feel like a meaningful ending to this film, both because the scale has dropped down from the giant robots to these 2 guys fighting on the ground, but also because he's never actually been framed as someone who's consistently facing this moral conflict. There is kind of mention at the beginning of the film that he tried to walk away from fighting in Robot Jox because he was tired of the death, but it then disappears and just gets lost amongst all this other kind of chaos. And if you look at the history of this film getting made, it was actually written by a phenomenal sci-fi writer called Joe Haldeman, and just kind of went through this kind of series of iterations where people gradually took everything excited out of it and rewrote it and rewrote it and rewrote it, and you ultimately just lost the thread. So I think there was the beginning of an ending there, but this entire story ceased to support it. So they've just kind of kept the ending there. It's kind of like the 90-minute version of the How I Met Your Mother finale, where you've just been waiting for you hit this ending, and they obviously wanted it there, but they've gone in so many different directions since then that the original ending no longer works, and people are actually going to get slightly mad about them. So those are the 3 ways. Your character absolutely needs to make a moral choice at the end of the story. In like 99.9% of cases, you don't always need it to be a huge moral choice. You don't always need it to be a moral choice that's explained to the reader. There are lots of films that get away with just kind of taking you to a point, lots of stories that get away with taking you to a point and giving the story all sorts of momentum, and then just kind of cutting off and saying, you're going to have to guess what the choice is after this. In film, it's things like Lost in Translation with Bill Murray, and in fiction, you can look at it in things like the Raymond Carver story, So Much Water, So Close to Home. There's just this kind of momentum, and they lead you to the choice and then just kind of go, what do you think happened? But, if you are making your choice too early and putting a whole lot of action afterwards, you are separating out the payoff, because the payoff, blowing up the Death Star is important. Blowing up the Death Star is the payoff for Luke making that choice. It's that moment where you get to go, yes, you have made the moral choice, and oh my God, now everything is going to be great. Waiting too long after the climax making a small moral choice after offering big moral choices, or making a moral choice that doesn't feel connected to the rest of the film, that doesn't feel like it's a reflection of the inner conflict this character has been going through. All right. So those are three ways you can still have that moral choice, but it still doesn't quite work. But the nice thing about this is once you know that that's the pattern, once you start seeing it in stories, you can start identifying, like, this film, this book, this story didn't quite work for me. What's going wrong? And it's often the problems of your ending are in the beginning, right? All of these films have moral choices that could have worked if other things had taken place at other points in the film. Those three things, look for them in stories that aren't quite working for you, whether it's something that you've written or something that you're watching, and you'll gradually start to see the pattern. You'll start to see those moments where, okay, this choice has not quite landed the way in which they thought it would. What's gone wrong? What kind of, where have I been led astray in sort of the choices I'm expecting these characters to make? All right, thank you for your time. If you've enjoyed this, give me a like down below, and I will look at doing a third follow-on. Thank you.